Hi, I'm Will.
I'm Norm.
We are here in the Mission in San Francisco, California, outside Photobooth SF.
Photobooth is a very peculiar photography studio. They take portraits, but not your typical portraits, Tintype portraits. We're gonna learn what that's about.
Let's go inside.
So I'm here with Michael Schindler, who's the photographer and co-owner of Photobooth in San Francisco. Now you guys are the only Tintype portrait studio that's open to the public that you know of, right?
So far as we know, the only place where you can actually come in any day of the week and just get your picture taken.
On a Tintype. Now, Tintype photography, that's something that a lot of people might not have heard of before. Can you explain what that is?
Well, it's an early photographic process. It was invented in 1851, and it's pretty much the way you would have made a picture before there was film. It's done on a metal plate, it's coated by hand, sensitized, and then put into the camera. An exposure is made, and then it's developed. The entire process has to be done in about 10 or 15 minutes, so it means that wherever you're taking pictures, you have to do all the processing on site.
So let me get this straight. Instead of having film like we normally would have, like not in a digital camera obviously, like a point and shoot, but you'd have a metal plate. And how did you get started in Tintype photography?
Well, I've been a photographer for about 20 years, and I've always been very interested in darkroom processes. And about 5 or 6 years ago, I just sort of worked my way to this process and was really captivated by it. I think the thing I like most about them is that I'm making everything myself by hand, mixing everything up from scratch. I'm not buying film, I'm not buying photographic materials from anyone.
So you're just buying metal plates, coating them with chemicals in a formula you've perfected, and then putting it in a camera.
Right.
And that photograph on the tin, is there a special look to that that's different than you normally get with other types of photography?
Well, yeah, there is. They're only sensitive to blue and UV, so that does some strange things to flesh tones. I shoot mostly portraiture, so it does make people look a little bit different. Also, since the plates are 4 by 5 inches and I'm using a 4 by 5 camera, the depth of field is very, very shallow. So it tends to just leave the eyes or one thin plane of focus.
Which looks really great for portraits.
Yeah, it's a good look for portraiture. And then also the plates themselves, since the image on the plate is just pure metallic silver, they do have this really sort of silvery metallic look to them, which is unique.
So in photography, you hear a lot about negatives, like the film is a negative, and on the Tintype, that's not necessarily the case, right? It's almost like a positive. How does that work?
Well, the interesting thing about it is technically it is a negative. If I did this on clear glass and looked at it on a light box, you'd see that it's a negative. It's just that the silver density that makes up the image is silvery white in color, and so if you view that on a black background, it does look like a positive. So the plates I'm using, they're aluminum, and it's actually laser engraving plate that I get from a trophy supply company. And that's something else that I really like about the process. There's only one. You know, even when you're shooting film, you have a negative and you can make prints, but with this process, there's only one Tintype, and there's only ever going to be one. You can't really duplicate it. Of course, you can scan it, make digital prints or whatever you want, but the Tintype plate itself, there is just that one image.
And you chose that 4 by 5 size because it fits like a medium format camera, so you're using regular camera equipment that anyone else would use with normal film.
Right, absolutely. I've made these in 35mm cameras. Of course, they're small, kind of 35mm film size Tintypes. I've made them in pinhole cameras. I've made them as large as 11 by 14 inches. That requires a very large camera, because whatever your finished Tintype size is, you have to have a camera that size to put the plate into.
Because of that, it's ideal to shoot that in a studio. Like you can't take this camera on the road, or can you shoot outdoors even?
Yeah, you can absolutely shoot outdoors, and I've done some landscape work. You know, of course, you have to have the darkroom with you.
Right, that's the fact. You need your suit, you need the lab to expose it within that 10 minutes.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
And I had made a darkroom trailer that I could drive around and make Tintypes with in the field. And the darkroom setup is actually really simple, so it's not a huge amount of stuff. Of course, I don't have an enlarger, I don't need any electricity, I don't really even need running water. I can just do this with a couple buckets of water.
It seems so cool. Why don't more people shoot on Tintypes?
Well, actually, a lot of of people are starting to do it. Just in the past several years, I think there's sort of been an explosion of people working with this process. So.
And when you're shooting, like, look at your camera right here. It looks like that looks pretty fancy. What type of camera are you using?
Well, this is a Sinar 4x5 film camera. It's actually, you can still buy this camera new. I've had this one for about 15 years. I used to shoot film in it. But you can use pretty much any camera to make it tintype with. You just have to have a way of putting a metal plate in the back.
Right. What's the difference between shooting with film and with the tintype in terms of your lighting and
well, yeah, it needs a lot more light. So if you're shooting film, you know, people are used to film speeds, ISO speeds being around 100, 400, something like that. This material, tintype, if it had an ISO speed, it would be somewhat less than 1, maybe 0.75. 0.5. The way I'm shooting here in the studio, I am actually using strobe, so it's all one instantaneous exposure. It's just a flash, but it takes a lot of light to do that.
So I'm back in the dark room with Michael, and he's going to run us through the chemistry of the tintyping process and explain why this only has to happen within 10 minutes from kind of start to finish.
Okay. Well, it is known sort of generically, this process and the ambrotype process, as wet plate collodion. And the reason it's called wet plate collodion is because throughout the entire process, the plate has to be wet. If it dries out, they're not really usable anymore. You won't get an image of them.
So even going into the camera, the plate remains moist?
It is moist when it goes into the camera. So what I'm starting with is I'm using this aluminum material, and it's just laser engraving plate. It's the same stuff they would engrave your name on, like, I don't know, photographer of the year 2012, something like. And because for this process, you need to have a black substrate in order to view it as a positive. Historically, they would have used steel plates, which were painted with asphaltum, and you know, several coats. It would be painted, then baked, then painted again.
To get a real nice, dark, smooth black surface.
Right. So the way the process works is first I'm going to be coating the plate with this, and this is called collodion, and collodion is sort of the common name for a liquid nitrocellulose solution. That's nitrocellulose that's been dissolved into ether and alcohol. Okay. Normally when you buy collodion, it's just water clear, syrupy. I thin it down with a little more ether, a little more alcohol to make it a little runnier. Okay. And then I add 2 different salts to it. In this case, I'm using cadmium bromide and ammonium iodide.
And what do the salts do in the process?
Well, those salts become sort of the halogen donors. The cadmium bromide and ammonium iodide will combine with the silver nitrate in the sensitizing tank, and that will allow silver bromide and silver iodide to form on the plate. This collodion is not light sensitive as it is right now, but it does contain these 2 halogen salts that will mix or combine with the silver nitrate to make silver iodide and silver bromide. Those 2 salts are light sensitive, and they're really the same 2 light sensitive silver salts that are used in virtually all photographic materials, including
black and white film,
black and white paper, even color films and papers use similar salts.
Cool. Okay, so now you have a light sensitive material coating the surface of the plate.
Yes. So
what happens next?
I'm going to coat this plate. I'm going to dip it into silver nitrate. It takes about 4 minutes for it to sensitize. When it's fully sensitized, I will take it out of the tank and I will load it into one of these film holders. I've modified, these are regular 4x5 sheet film holders, and they're readily available on the internet. And I just modify them by cutting the center metal plate out of the film holder. This used to hold a sheet of film on each side.
Oh, okay.
But I've cut the center out and just epoxied some little tabs in there so that I can put my
so it just rests in there, and there you go.
Yes.
And of course, after you photosensitize the plate, you're working in red light only, I assume, in here.
Yes.
And is this really super sensitive to light? Is this? I mean, I've worked with film before, and if you open the door just a tiny crack, then you can ruin an entire batch of film. Is it the same kind of situation, or not so much?
This, because of its much lower sensitivity, you can get away with a lot. You know, if you have some light leaking under the door, it's not a problem. My sensitizing tanks are made of orange plastic, so that sort of acts like a safe light filter, so I can actually walk in and out of the door while the plates are sensitizing in the tank. As long as I'm quick about it, it doesn't really cause any problem. After I've made the exposure, those silver salts that have formed on the surface of the plate will have been exposed to light, and then I will need to develop the plate.
So when the salts are exposed to the light, what happens to the salts?
What happens to the salts? Well, within each crystal, salt crystal on the plate, as long as one of the molecules has been struck by light and has been reduced to its metallic form, that causes what's called a sensitization speck within that crystal lattice.
So a photon hits the crystal, the salt, and
Yes.
it breaks up into the two components. We're talking about silver bromide and silver.
Well, what happens is one of those silver salts is struck by a photon, and the energy from that photon causes that molecule to reduce to its metallic form. You
Okay.
get metallic silver and, well, I'm not a
bromine
chemist.
or
Yes, whatever happens.
The other
to
part of
that.
the salt was.
Yes, yeah.
Okay.
So after I've made the exposure, I will take the plate out and I will develop it. And the development is very fast. So I just hold the plate in my hand, pour the developer over the plate, and as soon as the developer is done, I will rinse it off and
Okay.
I'll stop the development. At that point, the plates aren't really light sensitive anymore, or just they're so weakly light sensitive that I can turn the light
Doesn't
on.
matter. Okay.
And then the plate will need to be fixed in order to remove all of the silver salts that were not exposed
Okay.
and developed. And that was actually a big technological breakthrough in photography. They had known about light-sensitive materials for a long time, but it took them a while to find a chemical that would actually remove the unexposed silver salts without removing the exposed image as well.
Okay.
So when they finally figured out what kinds of chemicals they could use to remove those salts without removing the image, that was kind of a big deal because that allowed images to be permanent.
Okay.
So
That's very cool. And the fixers there's all sorts of different stuff you can use as a fixer.
there are a lot of different chemicals that will work. Sodium thiosulfate, ammonium thiosulfate are traditionally used in many photographic processes. Potassium cyanide also works.
Okay.
So yeah, there are many different chemicals you can use. But then after that, the plate can just be dried, and they dry quite quickly.
So because we're a tech site, I'm going to ask the computer question here.
Yes.
What kind of resolution are we looking at on these images compared to, say, film or a digital camera or something like that?
Really high. I would say that these plates have resolution similar to a very fine-grained black and white film. So
Okay.
it's pretty much like having a 4x5 film negative. So you're really only limited to the resolution of your scan.
Ben.
So, if you have a very high quality flatbed scanner, you can get huge files off of these. Unfortunately, they can't be drum scanned because they are rigid.
Right.
But you could shoot them on a copy stand with a medium format digital back and get massive files.
I mean, I've seen you've blown some of them up to massive, like 4 foot by 5 foot sizes. It looks like.
Yeah.
So-
Yeah. The resolution of the plate is not the sticking point really. It's more the scan.
Well, thank you so much, Michael, for taking our portraits and also telling us about Tintype. Where can people find out more information about Photobooth?
Well, our website is photoboothsf.com, and we're in the Mission in San Francisco on Valencia Street, and we're open 6 days a week, and people can just walk in without an appointment and sit down, have their tintype made. The whole thing takes about 20 minutes, and it's $60, and you walk away with a one-of-a-kind handmade photograph of you.
Awesome. Cannot recommend this more. Thank you so much again. I'm Norm from Tested. We'll have more later. Bye.